Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan, and a while back we talked about the announcement of a Warhammer MMO. Well, it's not really an announcement, it's a confirmation that Jackalyptic Games, which is funded by NetEase, is going to be working on a Warhammer based MMO. There is little to no information regarding this, however it does seem that there was a interview that was released around the same time with Jack Emmett, who is the lead on a website called WCCF Tech. Never heard of this website before, but there is a little bit of stuff that we need to talk about. So yeah, let's just jump right in. So I'm not going to go over the whole interview. You can easily just click the link in the description below, but I'm just picking out all the stuff of interest. So do you have a set goal for roughly how many employees you're going to have? I think the game design will really determine that. Ideally, it would be less than 100, but once we have a better idea of what we're making and how we're making it, I think that will really determine what the ultimate studio size will be. Okay, so this just tells me they don't know exactly what they want to do, which is a little concerning. You don't just announce an MMO and not really have some sort of plan, but I imagine that they're just going through the early concept stage. Well, they have the license, so that's confirmed, so yeah. Now for some actual information, did you already settle on an engine for the Warhammer MMO? We're pretty set on Unreal Engine 5. I think the days of creating our own engine are long over. I don't know. Okay, let's continue anyway. We've had wonderful options out there. You've got Unreal, you've got Unity. Both engines work obviously very well with online games such as ours. 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's very expected for people to go for these engines. It's very, very common. They've also got a little comment here regarding 5.2. I don't know if you've been following the latest Unreal Engine 5.2 release, which launched earlier this month. One of the main additions, the procedural content generational framework, could benefit your Warhammer MMO. We're actually just discussing Unreal Engine 5.2 in a meeting last week about when we are moving to it internally for development. Okay, so they're doing some alpha development, well, early alpha, I'm imagining, kind of like what's happened recently with the GTA 6 leaks and so on. Well, not that recent, it's been about 2 or 3 months. From what I've seen of the procedural content stuff, it's not too bad. I had to do some research regarding it, and yeah, it's just going to help with the world building, just fleshing out the world a little bit more. It's basically a paint tool, so it's going to be quite useful, I imagine. It shouldn't really affect how a game is going to be made that badly. It's just going to make it easier for devs. But yeah, let's move on. So again, no word on the setting. You can see that here. The reporter keeps trying to ask, but he is not budging whatsoever. Kind of makes sense, obviously. It's way too early for a proper announcement. It's just basically to get the buzz going. Mention of Warhammer Fantasy and mention of Warhammer 40k. Also, it could be Age of Sigmar, but I very much doubt it because there is rumors floating about that Frontier Developments actually own the IP for Age of Sigmar. They've got exclusive rights to it. Now, I'm not 100% sure how valid this may be, but it's something that obviously has to be taken into account. Fantasy right now is in the up with the upcoming release of Warhammer the Old World, and 40k is as popular as ever. Both of them would work extremely well. Obviously, Fantasy had something in the past with Age of Reckoning, which I believe does get mentioned in this interview, and then obviously 40k had a attempt at it, which was mostly lies, but yeah, and we do get a little bit more information which kind of points to one or the other. Let's see. One thing that is important to note is, yes, they have set which they're going to do, they're just not letting us know. So it seems that this game is going to be quite lore heavy, which is actually quite good to hear. There have actually been several Warhammer games in recent years, though there was only one MMO, Mythic's ill-fated Age of Reckoning. Of course, it's been a long time since that game. Well, it's still running, but by a fan project. And I know you won't be able to share a lot today, but what is your high-level vision for this Warhammer MMO project? I can certainly talk about a few generalities. Number one, I don't think the rich lore of Warhammer is widely known. I mean, dude, millions of people have played like Total War Warhammer. Loads and loads of people tune in to YouTube and stuff like that for lore videos. You can see like people like Luton or Major Kill getting hundreds of thousands of views. Warhammer might be considered generally niche, but it's not as niche as it used to be, say, 10 years ago. But let's continue. I mean, there are general fanboys like me who read the books, play the games, and so forth, but it's sort of like Marvel in the late 70s or early 80s, where you had a core audience that absolutely loved Marvel to death, but the mass market didn't really know about it. And I think Warhammer finds itself in a very similar way. Now there's going to be a series with Henry Cavill, and hopefully my game, and hopefully Space Marine 2, which is coming out soon. I mean, what do you mean, hopefully Space Marine 2? It's coming out. They're bringing back the fantasy old world miniatures game. Yeah, this looks like it's going to be centered around Warhammer Fantasy. And there are games for Warhammer Fantasy like Total War. They're bringing the message about what the IP is. And my goal is whichever Warhammer IP I'm working on is to teach people about it and unveiling in much the same way as the MCU has done for Marvel Comics, where it's taken the vast amount of lore, distilled it, and presented it so that people can slowly and surely learn about it. That's one area of focus I had. Okay, so one thing, before we get into like nitpicking, specifically mentioning fantasy like that, could be a Warhammer Fantasy MMO. Wouldn't say no to that. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, but kind of like the idea. Especially, obviously, you know, I'm a Warhammer Fantasy focused channel, and I love MMOs. I do play a lot of MMOs. 40k would be hard to do, let's be very honest. Another area of focus that is related to that is accessibility, making sure that anybody can sit down and play. That's been a consistent theme through much of my career, trying sometimes poorly to make sure that I'm allowing the game to be enjoyed by the greatest number of people. Fair play, it's not the first company, he's not the first dev to do accessibility. Blizzard has been doing a lot of that for World of Warcraft 2, which has been working out quite well. Features that I'm not really using too much myself, but you know, it's like colorblind settings, just easier the scaling text and all that type of stuff. That is good for people who might be harder seeing and all that. So yeah, okay, that's good. At the end of the day, I view any game that I make as a chance for someone to escape for an hour or two a day. Man, that's not what an MMO is for. To dive into another world. I don't want to overwhelm anyone with game mechanics and requirements. I just want them to sit down and enjoy themselves, so that there's another area of focus. Okay, let's talk about this, right? MMOs, generally, you don't put 1 hour, 2 hours in. MMOs are usually a grind, so you usually put a few hours in, sometimes a day, a lot of hours during a week, if you're very heavily invested into it. Unless they're going with the typical route that World of Warcraft is going now, which is a lot more casual. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because WoW is doing it very well right now, where there's stuff dedicated to actual hardcore players and stuff dedicated to a casual sense, but it needs to be done well. Another thing I just really want to point out is going, oh, I want to be the MCU of Warhammer. That's not a good thing. That's actually a red flag. I'll be very, very honest with you. When a Warhammer developer starts promising the world, you guys remember Eternal Crusade, or just kind of hyping it too much, it turns into a shit show. And I would rather if he took it in a very humble approach and waited until something was there to show, and show stuff bit by bit without end game plans. I want to see bit by bit showing as it's being, like, you know, revealed, with no massive promises. I do not want to see massive promises. I want to see realistic sounding promises that we've seen in, say, for example, other games before, as that will make sure that we'll be able to not get screwed over. I'm just putting it very lightly. Okay, so we can continue here. The first two things mentions the fact that they're not funded by NetEase, but they're part of them. Yeah, a bit of a red flag. However, they are allowed to actually go independently. They can work independently as much as possible because they're given freedom, which is good. Now, one thing is this, and that's the third question here. Most games made or published by NetEase end up on mobile. Is this the case for the Warhammer MMO as well, or will be only available for PC and consoles? The response is actually fairly interesting. The mobile market is not one that I know of. It's very hard, it's very difficult. I am by no means an expert in it, but I will say that the great thing about working with NetEase is that they're more interested in what I can create than in the platforms that I want to create it on, and they're good with whatever we choose. They've already chosen for sure, provided that it makes financial sense, of course. But that's never been any pressure or suggestion that we should have to do mobile. No top-down commandments like that. Okay, so it's going to be likely a very PC-focused game, likely with crossplay with consoles. That's stuff that we've been seeing lately. Even Diablo's been doing that, even though that's more of an ARPG, not an MMO. Yeah, okay, that's not too bad. He's not outright confirming it. I imagine that he can't really confirm it just yet. But, yeah, I pretty much think it's that. It looks like the game is going to focus on possibly more action-based combat, as they were asked about this, and the response was, I'm not sure if I'll ever go back to doing a more traditional MMO. Maybe one day I will, but I don't think so. All games that I've done, from Neverwinter to DC Universe Online, and of course that cancelled project, have focused mainly on games with more fluid combat than what I created when I first entered the industry years ago. I mean, that could work. I don't really play action-based ones. I'm still very heavily invested in WoW. It's one of those games that I just can't put down. But, hey, if the gameplay is good, you never know. There's another mention here regarding user-created content. So I never played Neverwinter too much, or Star Trek Online. I think, well, Neverwinter I played, like, very early on. So I don't think the Foundry existed at that point. But I'm not too sure if user-generated content could actually exist in a Warhammer MMO, because I really doubt that Games Workshop would allow for that. I'm just saying. I don't know. It sounds very odd, because modding is obviously allowed for, say, for Total War Warhammer, but for an MMO, it's a bit different. You know, you're actively screwing around with a fully implemented world, per se, so we're going to have to see there. And lastly, some mention regarding business model as a whole on the genre. I don't know if it really hints towards what's going to happen to this possible game. So several years ago, I would have thought that the free-to-play was the best option. I think the success of a game like New World has demonstrated that you can go straight up buy-to-play. New World success? What? Isn't it like drama-filled? They basically just created that game just to showcase what the engine could do. This was Amazon, of course, because like any streamer that did play New World, or at least the ones that I do watch, like for example Asmongold, they're not playing it, they're not touching it anymore. So I don't know. But let's continue. I do think that there's room for subscription-like systems, like Fortnite, which has done the Battle Pass, while I'm not sure whether a traditional monthly fee would be as successful today. It's very hard to do the Warcraft system. It's very, very hard. But there are options available that I didn't think were possible up until New World launched. I wasn't entirely sure that that one could successfully just sell a box and really make enough revenue. Obviously, that one did well. He's complimenting that a lot. So I'm expecting, what, buy the game and then probably a Battle Pass afterwards. Can't say I'm too keen. I don't really like battle passes. I mean, if it's just cosmetics and stuff, fair enough. But if it's stuff like pay-to-win stuff, then I'm not going to touch this game. We're going to have to see. Obviously, this game is still really far off. I don't imagine that we would even see a teaser until like maybe a year, 2, maybe even 3, depending on how long this actually takes. But I don't know. I mean, it's good to have a little bit of information. We're going to have to wait and see, obviously. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And yeah, let's start a bit of a discussion. I'm rather curious to see what you guys think about a potential MMO. Do you prefer fantasy? Do you prefer 40k? Do you prefer Age of Sigmar? Or do you think it should be just something different? I'm hoping for fantasy, I'll be honest with you. Old World setting would be great, considering that Old World is also potentially coming out this year. It would be great to have an MMO eventually launch and get updated as the Old World storyline continues. I feel like it'll be a lot easier than, say, for example, a 40k thing, which would require space travel and so on. I don't know. I'm open to anything so long as it's good. So far, I'm indifferent to everything until we actually get proper information, but I felt like you guys needed to know this. But yeah, you guys have a great day, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.